Peace and love, family. Welcome, welcome. Thank you guys for joining us once again on another edition of the RAM Book Club, Resurgence of the African Mind, where we seek to liberate African minds by reading one unit of work at a time. As you know, family, we just wrapped up the big one, Blueprint for Black Power. Right now, we are into the African Personality in America by Dr. Kobi Kambon. We are doing chapter 2 this week, family. Last week, we touched on the worldviews paradigm, legitimacy of cultural differences. And this week, family, we're going to talk about Afrocentric versus non-Afrocentric approaches to the study of African personality. I am Lily La Poete Speaks, aka Alima Njai. I am the author of Perceptions of a Misplaced African, Volume 1, family. If you don't have your copy, you can get your copy today at lilylapoetespeaks.com at the marketplace. Or if you prefer a digital copy, you can get your copy on Amazon, family. We're going to let the panel introduce themselves, and thank you guys for joining us.
Peace, love, and light. My name is Dr. Oyama. And sometimes I'm telling you, Sister Alima, I just want to get on here and say Dr. Deanna Bailey. Because, you know, when I named myself, which was totally wrong, right? I said, oh, you know, I read, you know, attributes of Oya, and I said, oh, I had that. Then, you know, I was studying the 42 principles of Ma'at and understanding that it, you know, that it was based on truth, you know, knowledge, justice, reciprocity. And I said, yes, I'm that. And so then I took them and combined them, sis, but you already know what I'm working on right now. And I'm not going to let everybody know, but I will have a new name. And I'm doing this the right way, sis. So anyway, my name is Dr. Deanna Bailey, also known as Dr. Oyama. I am the co-founder of Ed Anime Productions and the executive producer of the children's animated series, Mel Trek. Mel is short for melanin. Trek means journey. So we're taking you on a journey to understand the history, culture, and achievements of melanated people. All right. So family, I'm telling you, get this. Disney's not going to tell our story to our babies. Nickelodeon is not going to tell our stories to our babies. Cartoon Network is not going to tell our story to our babies, at least not through our lenses, right? Or through our perspective. So grab this. All you have to do is just Google Mel Trek. All right. We also have a storybook, Mel Trek storybook, which is available. I would flip through, sis, but it's hard for me to flip this book. But it's a good book. I don't know if you guys can see the pages, but it's a really good book, really good book. Sis, did you get yours in the mail yet? I mailed yours out last Wednesday, I believe. Did you get it yet?
Not yet, sis.
Not yet. Okay. So you'll have it by the next show. You'll have it by the next show. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Brother Mpu. Brother Mpu.
What's up, family?
Peace.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Abibi Afodie.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Yes. Again, it's always a pleasure to join the panel with these two beautiful goddesses and to learn and to study and to share. Representing PA, trying to liberate the African mind through this journey, this study, what I'm learning, and just ready to get into what the brother has laid out for us.
Absolutely. This was a powerful chapter. I know Sister Alima, we were inboxing each other on Facebook, and she was saying that this was a dynamite chapter. I second that. It was a dynamite chapter. I'm learning a lot of things, regarding, how we develop, how our personality, our mindset, our characteristics, how they are developed here in America. It's really an eye-opener, sis. I'm telling you, it's really an eye-opener for me. And so I'm looking forward to discussing this chapter tonight. Sister, you want to kick it off, chapter 2?
All right, family, let's do it.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into it. And I even love the quote that he began with Dr. Wade Nobles, when it says that power is the ability to define reality and to make others accept your definitions as their own.
That's right.
That's power. That is power.
To what Baba Wilson was saying as well, and I think it might have been chapter 2 or 3. It's very similar to the quote that Baba Wade provided at the beginning. But so first we get into ancient African foundations of African Black psychology. And so in this section, they start talking about Kemet, and how Kemet, as we know, provided the first great, blueprint, if you will, for human civilization. And then it gets to talking into the African core centered on principles of Ma'at, as like Dr. Ma'at was just talking about. And we know that the principles of Ma'at are, balance, unity with nature, harmony, and all that type of stuff. And Ma'at was the foundation of all thoughts and functioning in Kemet. Then we start getting into African Black psychology, but I don't want to go there yet. Anything from these 2 pages, sis?
No, it was just like you said, everything was sitting on Ma'at.
Yes.
I believe he says that Ma'at was like you already said that the foundation of all thought and functioning. So even in, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, neurology and medicine, engineering and architecture, social behavior, human relations, personal functioning, character development, all of this stuff was based on Ma'at, right? Ma'at was their system of thought. And I when I read this, I thought about, of course, I'm an engineer, so my mind went to the math. And I was thinking about how they add and subtract and multiply and divide based on the number 2, because of course 2 represents pairs. Mm-hmm. And so I found it, let me show you guys something really fast. So when he said that, here we go. All right. So when Dr. Kobi Kambon said that Ma'at was the foundation of all thought and functioning in Kemet, i.e. mathematics, my mind went to this book by Richard J. Gillings, Mathematics in the Time of Pharaohs. Now, I got this reference from Job's book, Civilization of Barbarism. And he said that Richard Gillings, he said, is assuredly one of the most competent, most honest, and most objective scholars who ever dealt with Egyptian mathematics. So because of Job's, because Job kind of pumped them up, I went ahead and grabbed the text. And in reading this text, I learned that the principle of duality or complementarity is at the core of Kemetic mathematics. Like they used a binary system. So everything was done in powers of 2, because they noticed and they recognize that any number can be expressed as a sum of powers of 2. So like if you go 2 to the 0, 2 to the 0 is 1, 2 to the 1 is 2, 2 to the 2 is 4, 2 to the 3 is 8, right? So any number can be expressed as a sum of the powers of 2. And even multiplication and division was based on like doubling and addition. So in Kemet, they didn't memorize multiplication tables. No need to memorize multiplication tables because of this use of the number 2. And so my mind went there, sis. Like, I'm thinking, daggone, these people even add, subtract, multiply, and divide based on pairs, based on balance. So that's what kind of came to mind when I read that particular statement. But go ahead, sis. I have nothing else to add on from page 23.
Good reference point, sis.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adupe.
Next, we get into the African Black psychology. And Baba kicks it off and he defines African Black psychology. And he said it's best defined as a system of knowledge, philosophy, definitions, concepts, models, procedures, and practice concerning the nature of the social universe from the perspective of the African worldview. So, basically saying that our psychology is best defined based off how we view the world, because that's all psychology really is. It's a breakdown of how you view the world. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And folks, for those who don't know what the African worldview is versus the European worldview, you got to check out our discussion from last week. Mm-hmm. Baba did a wonderful job breaking down or comparing and contrasting the African worldview to the European worldview.
That's right. And in reference to African psychology and European psychology, he said that the biggest difference is growing out of their previously discussed fundamental worldview distinctions is African psychology, historical priority, and its congruence with natural order. So everything that Africans do is in line with nature. You know what I'm saying? And everything that Europeans do, it seems to be an opposite of nature.
Absolutely.
African sacred sciences, spiritual sciences, they represent the philosophical and conceptual foundation for what we call psychology or mind sciences in the world. The observation, of course, recognizes the fact that Eurasians took and borrowed and stole African knowledge, wisdom systems, of course, and created and made it their own. We all know that, i.e. Muslim, Christianity and Islam and all the other religions that exist today. When Baba starts talking about the Eurasian survival thrust, and Bible says that every race has a survival thrust or a means of what they create in order for them to survive. So their psychology and the way that they view the world is based off how they feel that they need to survive, if that makes sense.
That's right. That makes complete sense. That makes complete sense, Six. And I wanted to add too that with European psychology, I love how Dr. Kobi Kambon, he tells us that they take their psychology or the way they think and they deem it universal.
That's right.
I mean, like, so I'm at the top of page 25 where, he went into, like you just said, that the Eurasians took and borrowed and stole African systems of knowledge, translated them the best they could, right? Did all of that into their cultural framework. He said, and i.e. the survival thrust, he said, and they labeled it universal human psychology.
That's right.
When we go to a European psychologist, or when we allow European psychologists to examine and diagnose the behavior of our children, we have to understand that they're using definitions, terms, all of these things, like Sister Alima just said, all of these things derive from a European worldview, which is oppositional to an African worldview. We have to understand that. So, for example, the psychologists will, European psychologists are quick to label our kids ADHD, or they're quick to say that they have some type of learning disability,
yes,
right? And they're basing it on their norms, right? What their norms are, and their norms are really not our like I'm, how hyper Jalen is, Sister Lima, bouncing off the walls. I don't look at it as he has ADHD, but in a European home, that may not be the norm. Right. So we just have to be careful. We have to understand, what's going on when these Europeans come along and diagnose our babies and examine our babies. We got to understand the paradigm that these definitions are based on.
That's why
I just wanted to add that in, sis.
I agree. But the study of African personality. Here. Echo.
Is that me? Let me mute mine. I'm sorry. Let me mute it.
Okay. So it says that the African personality in America, from the perspective of African psychology, is concerned. The implications of definition of African psychology utilized in this book seem clear. So in this regard, he said two important assumptions became readily evident. Number one, he says there are fundamental differences between the natures of African psychological character, cognitive, emotional, and behavioral style, and non-Africans, i.e. European psychological character. And number two, an accurate conceptualization, understanding, and assessment of the African psychological character can only be derived from the conceptual framework of the African worldview. So he's saying that there's no way that someone viewed with a lens of a European worldview can accurately assess and psychologically an African, because we don't have the same worldview. So you're viewing me and basing me off what you feel that I should be based off your worldview. And the two, as we know, they don't coincide because we're two different people, like literally extremely different people.
Absolutely, sis. Absolutely. So then he goes on to talk about the European psychology and the African personality. I have two things highlighted on this page. He says that Western or European psychology is about the affirmation of white European people's culture, philosophy, and physical survival. You already said that. And at the bottom, he says that white European people, Eurocentric history, ideas, and social philosophy, European personality, and social organization, beliefs, values, and customs, and behavioral dynamics and patterns have always defined the substance of Western psychology. So like you said, sis, that was, this is what we just finished saying a couple of minutes ago, that, when they examine us and diagnose, African behavior, they're basing it on their history, their beliefs, their values, and their customs. That's right. And their behavioral dynamics. Okay, he says, from this context, they have rendered their classic definition of European Western psychology as the science of human behavior and mental processes. Sis, isn't that very arrogant?
It is.
That is like extremely arrogant. So I come up with a discipline that is based on my conceptual framework, which is based on my worldview, And then I say that I have to apply this, that this must be applicable to all people.
Everybody.
I think that's extremely arrogant.
They are arrogant people, though.
Yeah.
You know, that's their nature.
Yeah, and I want to say this because
nature.
Absolutely. And I want to say this for those in the chat room might say, well, they're making a generalization. No, when she says that's their nature, Sister Alima is talking about their racial characteristic, their racial personality. We're not talking about the outlier, right? Or the anomaly. We're talking about their racial personality and their racial traits.
Right. Not your friend.
Not your friend. Right.
Not your baby mama.
Right. Right. And you know, it's always one.
Everybody on this panel now.
Right, because it's always
all up in Russia and all of that. Okay, maybe it ain't you,
right,
over there in Russia, but overall, that's the true dynamic, and that's undisputable. So
absolutely, and I think that is extremely arrogant. He goes on to say this, sis. He says because European psychology represents a Eurocentric framework for that's I think we're being redundant at this point. Yeah. I have to write it, but we've already stated it. Yeah. But one thing I do have underlined, I didn't even highlight this, on page 29, he says that Eurocentric axiological principles of individualism, materialism, he says duality, opposition, and conflict, separateness and alienation, linearity and ordinal ranking, and intervention through aggression, suppression, and unnatural alteration are summarily imposed on the African personality to reduce it to a defective, deficient, European form. I said, oh my gosh, sis. So then we looking at the things that are going on in our community, right? Things that are going on in our communities. And we're like, oh my gosh, how could someone do this? I'm talking about the pedophilia. I'm talking about the rape. You know, I'm talking about the murdering. And we say, well, wow, how could, you know, you'll say 20 years ago when certain things happen, you say, oh, Black folks didn't do that. We didn't do that. That wasn't us. That was white folks. But now, you don't know until they show the damn picture. Now, if it's something like, you know, shoot up a school, we already know. But typically when something goes on now, it's kind of like you can't really distinguish between, you know, you can't really determine whether or not we did it or they did it, right? Because it's like, right, our psyche is so similar to theirs. And as you said, that it's been reduced. You know, our personality has been reduced, it says, to a defective, deficient European form. Sis, are you there?
I'm here, sis. But okay. You know what? In that definition, that what you had just read, I had that highlighted as well. But what stuck out to me was that when he named the Eurocentric axiological principles, he named duality.
I looked at that.
A little bit. I was slightly confused because I wish he would have expounded maybe a little bit. I just want to know, and from what angle is he saying that that's a Eurocentric train of thought?
Yeah, and I know what you're saying. You know, I'm thinking, sis, that he's talking about the dichotomous nature of their worldview. Like, it's either this or that. Like, it's not wholesome,
right?
Because, you know, when I looked at it and read duality too, I said, wait a minute, because we believe in harmonious duality.
Right.
And he's talking about oppositional duality.
Okay, now that makes sense.
Or dichotomies. That's what
that makes sense. It does. In the context of how it's read, that makes more sense.
Okay. Cool. So he says that African psychology's thrust is to decolonize and liberate the African mind and to forge new cultural centered knowledge on, let me go back. African psychology's thrust to decolonize and liberate the African mind and to forge. So he's saying the objective basically of African psychology's thrust is to decolonize and liberate the African mind and to forge new cultural centered knowledge of the African psychological reality. So that is the objective of African, or some people say Black, and I'm with you, Sister Alima. I've used the term Black, but, you know, because I know that a lot of us identify with that term, so I use it, but I would definitely prefer to say just African, not African American, not African American. I understand why people say it, you know, but why do we even have to make that distinction? I just want to say that I'm African, you know, but I just, you know, so I still use the terms African American and Black because many of us identify with those terms, but I would actually prefer to just call myself an African. I'm just an African in America. And that's what it is. You know what I mean? So I totally.
That's how I feel too, sis.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even want to get on that because, you know,
I agree.
highly offended when you start talking about getting rid of the term Black.
I agree with you, sisters.
And my thing is, so if you don't mind being called Black, then what's wrong with being called colored?
Right.
Motherfucker get offended, you call them colored. Now wait a minute.
Right.
I called you Black. Isn't that a color? What the fuck's the difference? Like, I don't get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the same thing.
Because it was a racial thing. Oh, so we started calling ourselves Black people.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. And we forget, you know, the Portuguese, you know, Negro is a Portuguese word. Exactly. And it meant black. But people say, oh, you know, people talk about Spanish and all of that. No. That's the Portuguese were the first people that came over and got us. Let's go back to 1441. You know, they were the first people and they called us Negro, and Negro means Black.
Exactly.
So if you want to be called Black, like I'm with you, Sister Lima, well, why not be called color? Why not be called Negro? Same difference. Same difference. All right. So moving on. Do you have anything on 30?
I just had a little section, the so-called origin of the term personality within the European philosophical context, in fact, denotes its personal individualized meaning. So he's breaking down the term personality. He's saying that even within that, you can see the individuality within that, because he's saying that Africans didn't really view ourselves. We didn't have a need for a term. So there was no African term for personality because we didn't view ourselves separate from everyone else.
Right. So yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. He said you're likely conceive it. Yep. It's a psychological and biophysiological condition uniquely tailored to each individual. Yeah, you're right. So we're something separate than the whole.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, sis. And I'm looking at the bottom of page 31 where he says the traditional European psychological paradigm makes unilateral assumptions about the nature of so-called African American and European American experiences that we in African psychology believe are fundamentally error and violates all principles of cultural relativism in light of the overviewing evidence to the contrary. So he's saying that in traditional European psychological paradigm, it's a unilateral, they're making unilateral assumptions, meaning it's one-sided, it's one-way assumptions instead of basically a bilateral assumptions. And he's saying that this violates the principles of cultural relativism, right? So if it's relativism, it can't be unilateral, it has to be bilateral, right? So he's saying that that's one of the big errors in European psychology. And he's also on page 32, he goes on to say that, and he's talking about the different approaches, comparing the different approaches. And he says that, and when we say the different approaches, we're talking about the Afrocentric approach to understanding the African personality and the European approach to understanding the African personality. And he says the comparative approach to African personality assessment assumes a cultural, monistic, conceptual base being predicted upon the so-called melting pot thesis. So he says this thesis proposes that Africans in America, now we're still talking about European psychology. So he says that that in this assessment, it assumes a cultural, monistic, conceptual base being predicated upon the so-called melting pot thesis. This thesis proposes that Africans in America and European Americans are actually homogenous. Am I saying that right?
Homogenous.
Yeah, homogenous. All right, are actually homogenous group. So they're saying that we're all the same. That's what they're assuming, that we're all the same. And I was speaking to my cousin. I'm not going to say her name on the video, but I know that she's tuned in. She's a teacher. And we were talking about like the different pedagogies that are used in the educational system. And we were driving up to Philly this weekend, and she was telling me that a white guy, European American, came in, had a staff meeting with the teachers, and he admitted that the pedagogies that they employ in today's educational system were designed for European males. Mm-hmm. That's what it was designed for. It wasn't designed for African children and even not even European females. The teaching methods that they use, I'm talking about from the boards to all of the different strategies, it was created for European American boys. So they were talking about, creating new pedagogies, that will be, I guess, the word I want to use, and my cousin taught me this, with cultural responsive. So they're trying to be more culturally responsive. All right. So he says that this thesis proposes that Africans in America and European Americans are actually a homogenous group. It views only the African experiential history of enslavement and the continuing experience of racial discrimination as perhaps mitigating or differentiating factors, along with the implicit assumption of inferior genetic condition. Therefore, it assumes equivalence of meanings and behaviors across obviously distinct cultural realities. So he's saying that although we have different history, distinct cultural realities, they want to use the same meanings and behaviors. They want to apply the same meanings, behaviors, and definitions across the board because they are assuming that we are a homogenous people, a homogenous group of people. All right. Sis, do you have anything else?
Anything else, Queen?
A homogenous family. I definitely wanted to add on to that because in the chart right here, you see that, as Sister Lima said, it says like a positive energy assumption, that the Afrocentric theories have a positive energy assumption and the non-Afrocentric theories have a negative energy assumption. And, then you go back over here and it says that the Afrocentric theories have a proactive thrust and that the non-Afrocentric theories have a reactive thrust. So I just kind of wanted to explain to you guys what they were saying. I'm on page 34. He says that the Afrocentric approach to the African personality, then unlike the traditional non-Afrocentric approach, is guided by a positive energy assumption where the motivational thrust of the African personality is concerned. It says, hence, the motivational energy in the African personality, according to this approach, is culturally affirmative or self-affirming. Therefore, it says it is therefore proactive in nature as opposed to being strictly oppression-driven and thus reactive.
Like we are now.
Exactly, sis. So I just kind of wanted you guys to understand what Dr. Kobi Kambon, for those who have the book, because I know that some of you guys that are tuning in don't have the book. So I just wanted to kind of explain what he meant by positive energy assumption versus negative energy assumption and proactive thrust versus reactive thrust.
Right. And just to piggyback off the Dr. Ma, that's why
I don't have anything else, sis. I mean,
yeah, it's a lot of reiterations, even though I had a lot of things highlighted, but it's a lot of reiterations. Yes.
That our behaviors, that is abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you consider it abnormal because your definitions of normal may differ from ours. That's so, right. Because it differs, you'll deem our stuff as abnormal and your stuff as normal. So he talks about that on page 37, natural and normal condition and stuff like that. I don't have anything else highlighted from there. I'm on page 38, sis.
Okay. So on 38, he says they recall that the non-African
female and everybody's accepting that. Okay. But then again, you want to come off and play the Wakanda character on these commercials. This is where we are. You see what I'm saying? Just like with Dr. Kambon is saying, our personality, this is where they want us at. Okay, this is y'all want to be black, y'all want to, show that you African and connecting with Africa. That's cool. But at the same time, this brother's dating a white chick and hosting a black TV entertainment show this weekend. Come on now. He shouldn't even be allowed. If we would really own our game, if black folks is really on our game, there's no way he would be hosting that. I'm just saying. But this paragraph points out exactly where we are today in 2018.
I agree, brother.
Really known Jamie Foxx and this one chick.
Oh, Jamie Foxx is with a white girl?
Yeah, I forgot. She was married to Tom Cruise. Katie Holmes, I think it is.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh wow. To a lot.
To breed with our queens, or have some of our men breed, with their devils and whatnot, because they were trying to break down that harmony and that distinct gene that belonged to us at African in our African personality. And in some cases, I'm not that astute on it, but you can tell where there was some breakdown where some black folks today, they black on the outside, but on the inside they straight, they got a white mind, you know. So in that essence, they've won. But it's something about melanin. It's something about the African gene that even in their trying to destroy the essence of who we are, that ancestral gene continues to come through. And they wondering, why are these folks? Why is there a Dr. Maad in 2018? I thought we killed that. You know what I'm saying? We continue, like baby kids. Here we go. We just continue. We just continue to come forth. And it's a powerful thing that the ancestors has placed within us.
Absolutely, King.
He made up.
They're twins, but no one would think that. Someone would look at this child right here and call her black, right? Even though both of these twins are a product of, a black person and a white person. If you didn't know that these were twins, someone would look at this girl and say she's black, and someone would look at her and call her mixed or maybe white. They look at her and say, oh, she's white or she's mixed, and then say she's black. And these two girls are twin sisters.
Same mama, same daddy.
Yeah, they're twin sisters. So I just kind of wanted to,
because you just never know what DNA is going to do. That's the bottom line.
But hold on, I want to. He's not black. He is what you would call a trans Caucasian. He's a Caucasian, sis. Genetically. Someone will look at him and see the afro and call him black, right? And we have more examples. So we have to be careful when we have to be careful with the phenotype game.
That they were, let me get my thoughts together, that they had a lot of brothers were trying to claim that it was us, but he was saying no, they were actually what you just said, sis, way back then, as far as pharaohs and whatnot sitting on the throne. He was like, those folks were mulattoes, and just watered down. If I'm trying to be kind here, just watered down blacks. Dr. George James talks about that too, and he talks about the mulatto problem. But that's I'm reaching. I'm trying to getting off the subject just a little bit, but it's definitely an issue we need to look into more.
Absolutely. Curious. While he's looking that up, okay, at the bottom of page 41. Okay, so your environment, I don't want to say it predicts, but your environment produces your culture, right? And then your culture produces your worldview. And your worldview is responsible for formulating your survival thrust, how you push to survive, your approaches to survival, okay? So your survival thrust is predicated on your worldview. Your worldview is predicated on your culture. Your culture is based on your environment. Now, when you practice, and I'm talking about for anybody, this can go for any race. When you practice an alien culture or an alien worldview, that leads to psychopathologies, all right? It leads to psychopathologies, and we talked about that a lot last week. And today we talked about, the different approaches to studying worldview, particularly the Afrocentric approach to studying a worldview and the Eurocentric approach to studying a worldview. So since I just wanted to kind of recap and summarize it, kind of pull it all together. And next week, we're going to focus on chapter 3, the nature of the African personality. So that's what we'll be talking about. That's what we will be discussing next week, the nature of the African personality. Sister, you have any more? You have anything else left?
Just going to plug in some things real.
Way to go, sis. Article think that we childhood guardian or caretaker in their worldview orientation, values, beliefs, and customs, right, are imposed on the child. So if your parents are Eurocentric or have a Eurocentric orientation, so will the child, right? Not even just your parents. Look at this. If other family members, your grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, their worldview orientations also influences the worldview orientations of your child. So then he goes into the worldview orientation of the home's social and physical environments, cultural ambience. Remember, you and I were talking about that, Sister Alima, a while ago. We were discussing the importance of living around people who share your same culture, who share your same worldview, because ultimately, the worldview orientation of the people who live around your home also influences your child's worldview, right? And then he talks about, television and radio, which, media, and then the worldview orientation of the school, the social, physical environment, right? So this is how your worldview is being influenced. And so that's why, sis, as I stated before, tools like Meltrek, tools like Tell Me Who I Am by Kid Positive,